Hey man, there comes a point in your life when you finally realize that chasing someone who isn't meeting you halfway only destroys you from the inside out. And the moment you stop reaching out, when you stop texting her, stop calling her, stop checking if she viewed your story or liked your post, something inside you shifts, not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You realize how much of your emotional world revolved around the possibility of her attention, and how draining it became to wait for responses that never matched your effort. Distance becomes your turning point, silence becomes your self-respect, and the moment you choose not to chase, you begin reclaiming parts of yourself you didn't even realize you had given away, piece by piece. When you stop contacting her, the first thing that changes isn't her, it's you. You stop living in that anxious space, where every notification feels like hope, and every hour of silence feels like rejection. You stop trying to decode her mixed signals, stop analyzing why she responded quickly one day and disappeared the next. All that mental noise that once consumed you begins to quiet down. You start feeling how heavy the attachment truly was, how much pressure you carried alone, how much emotional weight you kept trying to hold up by over-communicating. The moment you step back, you see how exhausting it was just to maintain a connection she wasn't contributing to. But something else happens. The moment you stop reaching out, she finally comes face to face with the space you used to fill. When you were always texting first, calling regularly, checking up on her, showing interest, asking about her day, she never felt the absence of effort. She never saw the imbalance because your presence covered it. But the moment you withdraw that effort, she's forced to confront the truth of the dynamic. She begins noticing the silence. She begins noticing the lack of messages. She begins noticing that the emotional warmth she once expected from you has vanished. And that realization hits harder than anything you could have said. When you stop looking for her anywhere, not online, not through mutual friends, not even through small breadcrumbs of curiosity, you reclaim the emotional power she never realized you had. Suddenly, she isn't the center of your thoughts. Suddenly, you're not waiting for crumbs of attention. Suddenly, you're not depending on her reactions for validation. This shift reveals something important. The moment you stop chasing, you stop being controlled by uncertainty. You begin growing into a man who no longer needs external reassurance, and that inner steadiness changes everything because emotional independence is far more attractive than constant seeking. You'll also start to see how differently the world feels when you're not locked into the cycle of waiting for responses. You become more present in your own life, your goals, your growth, your routines. You begin noticing how much of your time and mental space you gave up to someone who gave you nothing but sporadic attention in return. And as you detach, something inside you straightens, like your emotional spine finally standing upright after being bent for too long. You no longer feel that familiar tension in your chest every time you pick up your phone. You begin breathing normally again. That alone tells you how uneven the connection truly was. But the most surprising shift is this. The moment you stop initiating everything, she begins feeling an unfamiliar tension of her own. A woman always knows when a man who chased her has gone quiet, not because she was thinking about him constantly, but because she notices the absence of emotional attention, the same way someone notices a room that suddenly loses its warmth. At first, she tells herself she doesn't care. She rationalizes it. She convinces herself that your silence means nothing. But as the days pass, that narrative becomes harder to hold, because silence does something conversation never could. It forces her to wonder. At this point, she starts replaying old interactions. She remembers how consistently you reached out. She remembers the comfort of knowing you were always emotionally available. She remembers the guaranteed attention, the predictable affection, the reassurance she unconsciously depended on. And now that it's gone, she begins to question why. She starts scanning her memory for the moment the shift happened. This mental replay isn't something she controls. It's a natural reaction to emotional contrast. She can only ignore your absence for so long before curiosity becomes concern. Not texting her doesn't mean you're angry. It means you're no longer willing to give energy to something that drains you. Not calling her doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally understand you can't keep giving effort to someone who only shows up when it benefits her. And not looking for her anywhere isn't coldness, it's discipline. It's the discipline to not feed an attachment that was starting to cost you more than it gave. Men don't detach because their feelings disappear. They detach because they finally choose themselves. And here's the part most men underestimate. When you disappear emotionally, you give her space to see who she is without your presence. Some women realize they lost someone who truly cared. Others realize they weren't as invested as they pretended to be. But either way, your distance clarifies the truth. If she genuinely cared, she'll fill the void. If she didn't, your silence removes you from an emotional loop that wasn't leading anywhere anyway. Either outcome brings you closer to peace. Eventually, she begins to feel a subtle discomfort, a growing awareness that you're no longer orbiting her world. She notices that you didn't show up where she expected you to. She notices that you stopped viewing her stories. She notices that you don't interact with her posts. She notices that you no longer check in. And that discomfort doesn't come from losing control. It comes from losing emotional certainty. For the first time, she realizes you have the ability to walk away quietly, and nothing creates clarity like the silence of someone who used to care out loud. As more time passes, she starts realizing something she never expected. Your silence feels different from any silence she has ever experienced. It isn't passive-aggressive. It isn't emotional manipulation. It isn't a plea for attention. It's grounded. It's calm. It's steady. It carries a certain maturity that she wasn't prepared for. Because when a man stops texting, calling, and searching out of emotional clarity instead of wounded pride, the energy is unmistakable. She can sense that you're no longer waiting for her. She can feel that you've stopped needing her reactions to define your worth. And that shift quietly unravels the power she thought she held over the situation. At some point, she begins to wonder what changed in you. She starts questioning whether someone else has caught your attention, not because she sees evidence, but because your silence makes her rethink everything she assumed. She's not used to you being unreachable. She's not used to you being emotionally unavailable. She's not used to you protecting your peace instead of prioritizing her. That unfamiliar energy keeps circling her mind. Even if she says nothing, even if she pretends not to care, she feels the sting of realizing you are capable of independence. She underestimated. When you don't text or call, she starts noticing how much space you once filled in her life. Not with words, with presence, with patience, with effort, with consistency. She remembers how safe it felt knowing you were always there, even during her indifferent moments. But now, in the absence of reassurance, she begins to recognize the quiet comfort you used to provide. It's only when your communication disappears that she sees how much it actually meant. And this recognition isn't loud or dramatic. It shows up in silence, in the late-night reflection she pretends she never has. She also starts feeling the emotional imbalance she once ignored. When she used to delay replies, you understood. When she pulled back, you leaned closer. When she went cold, you warmed the connection. But now, that dynamic has vanished. The effort is equal to what she gives. Nothing more, nothing less. And for the first time, she realizes what it feels like to stand on the other side of that imbalance. She begins to understand how heavy it was for you to carry both sides of the connection. And that awareness hits harder because you never said it, you simply stepped away. Not reaching for her gives her space to experience something she avoided for a long time. Accountability. She's forced to consider how her actions, her inconsistencies, her mixed signals, her lack of appreciation contributed to the emotional distance. Instead of blaming circumstances, she has to look inward. The silence you've created holds up a mirror she can't avoid, and what she sees isn't always flattering. She begins seeing the moments where she dismissed your effort, ignored your feelings, or took your presence for granted, and that internal confrontation creates a discomfort she can't easily hide. At the same time, something is changing within you as well. You're beginning to realize how much emotional energy you saved by not chasing. You're seeing how much clearer your mind feels, how much calmer your days are, how much more focused you become when you stop giving energy to someone who wasn't giving any back. The longer you stay silent, the more you recognize that the connection you were fighting for might not have been balanced to begin with. And that clarity becomes intoxicating in the best way. You're no longer addicted to uncertainty. Eventually, she will start wondering if you've moved on, not necessarily with another person, but with yourself. She notices the confidence that emerges when you stop seeking external validation. She sees the difference in your energy when you stop reaching out. And even if she keeps her distance, she feels the shift like a shadow standing behind her thoughts. Because there is nothing more unsettling than realizing someone you once had full access to is now emotionally unavailable by choice. It threatens the illusion of emotional security she once held. You not texting or calling also removes the emotional safety net she depended on. She no longer has the comfort of knowing you'll always respond, always chase, always check in. She no longer has the predictable pattern of your attention to fall back on, and that uncertainty forces her to reassess what you meant to her. This reassessment doesn't always lead to immediate action, but it leads to internal questioning, the kind that slowly shifts her perception of you from someone she took lightly to someone she now sees differently. She may pretend she doesn't care, she may act busy, she may stay silent longer, but deep down, the lack of your presence lingers. When you stop reaching out, she can feel something inside her, unsettling, not panic, but awareness. The awareness that you're no longer emotionally dependent. The awareness that you're capable of detaching without announcing it. The awareness that she doesn't have the same access to you anymore. And that awareness begins to challenge the narrative she built about you, that you'd always be the one who cared more. And finally, there comes a moment where your silence forces her to see the truth she never expected. Losing access to you might actually matter. Not because she suddenly wants a relationship, not because her feelings return overnight, but because she realizes something deeper. Your presence wasn't just attention, it was stability. And now that it's gone, she feels the imbalance in her own emotional world. That's why you don't text her. That's why you don't call her. That's why you don't look for her anywhere. Because detachment isn't revenge, it's self-preservation. And sometimes the quietest decision becomes the one that changes everything. With more time, your silence begins, doing something you never expected. It resets the emotional dynamic. You spent so long being predictable, accessible, available on demand, that she unconsciously assumed your presence was permanent. But now the man she thought would always be within reach has stepped into a version of himself she didn't anticipate. And this shift forces her to confront a reality she ignored. Attention from a man who truly cared is not something she can replace easily. She might distract herself, she might stay busy, but there is no substitute for being valued by someone who actually meant it. There's also a moment where the absence becomes louder than anything you could have said. She begins noticing the difference in how her phone feels without your name appearing. She starts realizing how quiet her days are without the small moments of connection you offered. What used to feel ordinary now feels strangely empty because your consistency created a rhythm she didn't appreciate until it stopped. It's in these silent gaps that she begins recognizing what she once dismissed as normal interaction was actually effort, care, and emotional investment, all of which she now feels the lack of. She may try to convince herself that she's fine. She may tell her friends she doesn't miss you. She may scroll through her phone with the same confidence she had before. But underneath that surface performance, she's wrestling with uncertainty. She can't admit out loud, because when someone who always showed up suddenly doesn't, it forces a deeper reflection. Why did he stop? Was it something I did? Did he finally get tired? Did he finally see my detachment for what it was? These questions don't disappear. They settle in her mind like quiet, unresolved echoes. Meanwhile, your silence develops a strength of its own. It's no longer about pulling back from her, it's about reconnecting with yourself. You start noticing the difference in how you sleep, how you think, how you move through your day. You feel lighter, less tangled in emotional confusion. And suddenly you realize the connection you were trying so hard to maintain was costing you inner peace. This recognition is powerful because it doesn't come from anger or disappointment, it comes from clarity. For the first time, you see how much you were trying to fix something that wasn't mutual. She might even attempt to test the waters without directly breaking the silence. She'll watch your stories from a secondary account. She'll interact with something small to see if you respond. She'll show subtle signs of curiosity while pretending to be distant. These are not signs of strength. They're signs of someone trying to regain a sense of emotional certainty. And even if she doesn't respond outwardly, your silence has created an imbalance she can no longer deny. Suddenly, you're not the man waiting for approval. You're the man she's quietly observing. As she reflects more, she begins understanding the emotional comfort you used to give. Not because you were overly affectionate or clingy, but because you offered stability in a world where most people are unpredictable. Your presence was grounding. Your consistency provided a small but meaningful sense of security. And now that it's gone, she has to face the reality that not everyone will stay just because she wants them to. She begins realizing that emotional reassurance is fragile, and once lost, it's difficult to recreate with someone new. Silence also forces her to evaluate her own behavior. The cold replies, the delayed messages, the moments she was distant, the times she dismissed your effort as unnecessary. When you were available, she saw no reason to change. But now your absence reveals the imbalance she used to ignore. She starts realizing how often she took your communication for granted. She remembers moments where she could have been warmer, but chose not to be. and even if she never apologizes, she feels the weight of those choices when she compares them to how empty everything feels now. Eventually, your distance challenges her assumptions about you. She thought you needed her attention to feel valued. She thought her inconsistent behavior wouldn't affect you. She thought you'd always come back no matter how she treated you. But your silence disrupts that expectation. It shows her you have emotional boundaries. It shows her you're capable of walking away without theatrics. It shows her you're not a man who begs, pleads, or clings. That realization reshapes the way she sees you, not as someone emotionally dependent, but as someone who grew stronger in the absence. You also begin seeing her differently, not through the lens of longing or hope, but through understanding. You see that reaching out wouldn't change anything. You see that forcing connection never creates real intimacy. You see that giving energy to someone who doesn't appreciate it only steals from your own growth. And in this clarity, you find something far more valuable than her attention. You find direction. You begin investing into the things that make your life fuller, steadier, more aligned with who you want to become. And eventually the silence becomes the final filter. It reveals whether she truly cared or whether she only enjoyed the attention. If she reaches out, it's because she felt the emotional shift and couldn't ignore it. If she stays silent, it's because she was never going to give you the consistency you deserved. Silence uncovers the truth faster than any conversation ever could. That's why you don't text her. That's why you don't call her. That's why you don't look for her anywhere. Because the moment you stop trying to hold on to someone, you finally see whether they ever held on to you. With time, something else begins to unfold. You start recognizing how much of your emotional energy was spent trying to interpret mixed signals that were never meant to be solved. When you were constantly texting or calling, every message carried an expectation. Every silence felt like a threat. Every delayed response put you in a state of confusion. But now, as you sit in the stillness you created, you realize how much healthier life feels without depending on her reactions. You understand that peace was always available, but you couldn't see it because you were too busy chasing clarity from someone who never offered it. This space gives her time to sit with her own contradictions. She starts noticing how quickly she dismissed what you offered. She begins recognizing the moments where she acted distant simply because she assumed you'd keep trying. And while she may not admit it, she feels the impact of losing someone who didn't ask for much, just reciprocation, respect, and emotional presence. Your silence forces her to confront how carelessly she handled something meaningful, and even if she pretends not to care, the weight of that realization sits somewhere deep, quietly reminding her of what she misjudged. There will also come a moment when she tries to convince herself that your silence doesn't affect her. She'll tell herself she's fine, that she has options, that she doesn't need your attention to feel validated. But beneath those surface-level affirmations, she feels something tightening inside her, an awareness she can't outrun. The awareness that she no longer has the emotional advantage, the awareness that you're no longer accessible, and the awareness that someone who once gave her unwavering warmth can now walk away without hesitation. That shift is subtle, but it destabilizes her more than your words ever could. Your silence becomes a quiet reminder of your growth. You didn't walk away dramatically. You didn't throw accusations or force emotional conversations. You simply stopped giving energy to someone who wasn't giving it back. That kind of maturity is rare, and whether she admits it or not, she feels the difference. It separates you from the men who chased out of insecurity. It places you among the men who choose peace over emotional chaos. She begins to see that you didn't disappear to punish her. You disappeared because you finally prioritized yourself. As she processes the shift, she starts reconsidering the moments she once found insignificant. Your check-ins, your consistency, your interest, your warmth. These things didn't stand out before because she assumed they were guaranteed, but your silence highlights their value. Suddenly, the attention she once overlooked feels irreplaceable, and this contrast creates an internal conflict she can't easily escape. She begins questioning why she didn't appreciate what was in front of her when she had the chance. This isn't regret, it's recognition, the kind that arrives too late. In your silence, you also begin to understand something essential. Relationships aren't built by chasing someone into caring. You finally see that real connection doesn't require you to convince someone of your worth. It doesn't require endless communication, constant reassurance, or proving yourself through effort alone. Your silence becomes a reminder of your own value, a reminder that you deserve balance, emotional presence, and partnership. And the more grounded you become, the less desire you feel to return to situations that drained you. She may try to fill the void with distractions, new people, new conversations, temporary excitement, but none of these substitutes replicate what you offered, because what you gave wasn't attention, it was sincerity. Most people can provide entertainment, few can provide emotional steadiness. And when she compares what she has now to what she once had, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. She may not reach out, but she feels the absence in ways she never expected. Your silence also pushes her to confront the truth about her own patterns. She begins seeing how often she has created distance in relationships, only to feel dissatisfied later. She notices the cycle, pushing away the men who cared, chasing the ones who didn't, and your absence becomes part of that realization. For the first time, she sees you not as someone who needed her, but as someone who offered something meaningful that she wasn't emotionally prepared to accept. And this recognition forces her to examine parts of herself she usually avoids. As more time passes, the space you created begins to define the final outcome. Your silence is no longer just a reaction, it becomes the new normal. You're no longer reachable at all hours. You're no longer emotionally invested in her inconsistent interest. You're no longer checking up on someone who didn't check up on you. And this change shifts the balance permanently. She has to decide whether to close the distance or let the silence become permanent. But the power is no longer in her hands, it's in yours. And eventually, she realizes the truth. You didn't stop texting, calling, or looking for her because you stopped caring. You stopped because you finally understood that chasing someone who doesn't meet you halfway is the quickest path to losing yourself. Your silence is your boundary. Your silence is your clarity. Your silence is your transformation. And whether she returns or disappears forever, you've already won, because you reclaimed the part of yourself you were losing while trying to hold on to her. That is the real power of letting go without anger, without drama, and without explanation. As the silence stretches, you begin to understand why stepping back was the only choice that made sense. When you were constantly in her orbit, you couldn't see how much of your identity was slowly being shaped around her responses. You didn't notice how much your mood depended on her tone, how easily your day could be affected by her inconsistency. But now, without her presence echoing in your thoughts, you begin to reclaim emotional freedom. You start noticing how strong you feel when you're not living in reaction to someone else's behavior. This is when you finally understand that silence isn't something you run to out of fear. It's something you choose because it brings clarity. Your pullback becomes a quiet confrontation with the truth she never considered. She always believed you'd be the one who stayed, the one who waited, the one who showed loyalty, even when she offered very little in return. But now, as your absence grows, she sees that patience has limits. She realizes you weren't attached because you were weak. You were attached because you cared, and once caring stopped being valued, you had the strength to step away. Nothing confuses someone more than realizing the person they underestimated is the person they can't replace. There's a point where she starts replaying every moment where you showed more affection than she acknowledged. She remembers the times you reached out first, the effort you made, the emotional support you gave. These memories don't haunt her out of guilt. They haunt her because they expose a truth she didn't want to face. Not everyone will stay, just because she wants them to. She begins to see that your presence wasn't guaranteed, and losing someone who was genuine leaves a void that casual connections can't fill. That void grows louder with every day of silence. As for you, the distance starts teaching you self-control. You learn that your emotions don't have to govern your decisions. You learn that wanting someone doesn't require you to chase them. You learn that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity to keep them. And with each day that passes, you feel your sense of identity becoming stronger. The silence you once feared becomes the silence that rebuilds you. You notice how different you feel when your energy is directed toward your life, your goals, your growth, instead of someone else's inconsistencies. She may eventually start testing the waters again. Not directly, indirect signals, subtle interactions, random appearances, meant to see if you'll respond. She might not message you outright, but she'll look for ways to signal her presence. This isn't affection, it's curiosity, mixed with an attempt to regain emotional footing. She wants to know if she still has access to you. She wants to know if the dynamic is still in her favor. And your continued silence answers that question without a single word. It shows her that your world has expanded beyond her influence. Your silence also reveals a deeper truth about her behavior. She wasn't used to being emotionally challenged. She's accustomed to men trying harder when she pulls away, men proving themselves when she acts distant, men fighting for attention, even when she gives none. But you didn't do that. You stepped back, you detached, you refused to participate in the emotional tug of war. And that unexpected reaction triggers something she doesn't know how to process. For the first time, she realizes you're not driven by desperation, you're driven by self-worth. The longer the silence continues, the more you start to see her clearly, not as the idealized version you once created, but as the person she truly is. The red flags you ignored become clear. The moments she was indifferent feel sharper in hindsight. The lack of reciprocity becomes impossible to overlook, and in that clarity, you feel something surprising: relief. You realize you weren't losing someone irreplaceable, you were letting go of someone who didn't value you the way you deserved. This emotional shift frees you from the illusion you were holding onto. And while you're growing, she begins struggling with the one thing she hoped would never happen: losing emotional relevance in your life. She notices you don't respond to subtle hints, you don't seek updates about her, you don't engage with her online presence. She senses the emotional distance and feels the shift more intensely than she lets on. Not because she suddenly loves you, but because she realizes you're no longer a man she can predict or control. That unpredictability ignites a type of longing she didn't expect to feel. By now, the silence has become the final definition of your strength. It isn't emptiness, it's alignment. It's you choosing emotional maturity over emotional chasing. It's you choosing stability over mixed signals. It's you choosing your mental peace over moments of temporary attention. And the more grounded you become, the less interest you have in returning to the chaos you walked away from. The silence that once felt painful now feels like clarity that was overdue. In the end, not texting her, not calling her, and not looking for her anywhere becomes more than just an action. It becomes a message that says you're done watering a plant that never grew. A message that says your value isn't dependent on someone's recognition. A message that says you're ready to invest in people who show up with consistency, not confusion. And whether she returns or disappears, it no longer defines you. You've reclaimed your focus, your confidence, and your emotional power. And once a man finds peace in silence, he never again chases the noise that broke him.